Okay. So Zach, let's just get comfortable. Well, first, let me formally introduce you and welcome you to the Sober is Dope podcast and the Sober is Dope experience. It's really an honor to have you. I know we've been playing a little cat and mouse, and we're both busy guys, but I'm glad you're here today. And can you just take a moment and really just introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah. Well, first off, it's an honor to be here, and I love everything you do. Like, I'm just way into it. Um, so that's why I reached out to you because I just love what you do. But anyway, yeah, my name's Zack Rutledge, and I guess the reason I'm here is because I wrote a book called the official Depression Relief Playbook, and as the title would suggest, I went through some pretty serious bouts of depression, and if you were wondering why you should listen to me, why I wrote this book, some of my credentials are, I'm a black belt in karate. I'm a new yoga teacher. I'm a personal trainer, fitness nutrition specialist. I'm a brain trainer. And I kind of like collected all of those things and I put all those things in the book to kind of help people get over that hump a little quicker than I did. Yeah.
Right. Which hump? Was that depression and it's a mental health thing? Because we covered that a lot. Was there any components of addiction in there?
There wasn't. I was lucky enough to just not have that at all.
That's
Lucky enough to have it.
amazing.
Yeah, and I played in I still play in a lot of bands, but at the time when it was real bad, I was playing in bands, and I was around a lot of it. And I actually just lost our drummer a couple years ago to a heroin overdose.
Oh man, that must be tough. That's tough. That's
So
tough.
yeah, so that's one of the reasons I love what you do. I mean, I've been around it, but I just don't have that gene. I don't have that addictive personality with the thing. Everybody's got their quirks, but mine was depression and anxiety. Yeah.
So we know that depression is really a big issue in the addiction community.
Yeah.
It's a worldwide issue, mainly because when people experience depression, they tend to self-medicate in
Yeah.
multiple ways. It could be people use sex, people use eating, people use drugs and alcohol. And that's a big pain point for me in my early process. So I'm excited to talk to you about it because it's not quite often we have someone who comes on that really could say, hey, that was a thing of my past. Usually it's everyone talking about how they overcome and conquer addiction, but you actually conquered depression. And that's something that everyone is dealing with, especially being, post pandemic and stuff like that. We really have to be kind of mindful of how sensitive the environment is. So, can you give us a little bit of insights on the state of your depression? What do you think was the causes and how bad was it?
Yeah. So like I had like a pretty quote unquote normal childhood, right? Even though there's no such thing, but it was stable for the most part, right?
Right.
And like looking back now that I have the insight, I could see that there were some kind of things popping up in my teenage years, but I figured I was just a moody punk rocker. I just thought that's how I was. And it wasn't until I was 18 when I call it the perfect storm hit. So it was just after high school. I just graduated high school, about to go to college, and my best friend was killed. All my friends were leaving for college, so I had no like support system there. My karate school closed down, which I had been in for 8 years, which is
Wow.
tough. And there tends to be this pattern where like quirks, let's say, like we said, tend to pop up. So like in your late teens, early 20s, and it was right at that time when everything spiked up, and and it got dark, and it got real dark for those first couple of years. And it took me about, to be honest, about 10 years to get out. I was doing it pretty much solo. But I built myself back up brick by brick and just learning these things along the way. And that's really what I condensed down into this book. Because my mission now, like you are trying to help, like addicts or people just get sober, really is really kind of your mission right now. My
Right.
mission is helping people with depression. And there's a lot of crossover there. And
Right.
I'm trying to get them, to where I am now, but in a way quicker, time span.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's a 10-year span. You're young, right? You experience grief and loss because of, one of your friends died and then you lost your karate school closed down. So what we've been studying and really focusing on this in the Sober's Dope podcast is grief, pain, and loss, and
Yeah.
how that affects the brain negatively in most cases, and as a form of trauma, right?
Yeah.
So when we experience any form of rejection, whether it's a divorce, a breakup, you lose your job, someone dies in the family, we know the brain goes to neuroplasticity and can have a negative effect and change, and then you could develop these depressive symptoms. So it may be a link there between you losing your friend, you're young, right? That's traumatic,
Hmm.
right? Then this kind of comfort, your backbone was martial arts, and then the school closes. These are compounded forms of loss. So is there
Right.
any connection in your research between loss, depression, grief, and depression?
There is, but first off, I should just say that grief and depression are two different things.
Right,
One can set off another, but I just want to get this one out of the way so we understand it.
right,
Grief is something everybody has to go through.
correct.
Okay. And you can medicate, you can self medicate, and you can try to get around it. But at some point, you've got to get over that mountain. Okay.
Yes,
And
right,
that's everyone. Depression, you don't have to go through. Now, grief can bring on depression, right? So,
right.
especially if you're, they call it dysthymia. So, if you're dysthymic,
Yeah, high functioning, right?
yeah. So, I mean, so like if there's a traumatic event, that can spin you out of control and spin you into a depression. So they are
Mm.
kind of two different things, but there is a relationship there. Yeah.
Yes, because when we was doing, a lot of my research started from tracing back bereavement for the death of my father, right?
Right.
So when my
Right.
dad died, out of that grief, it manifested as a form of depression in me. So the grief and the loss really did a number on me, and I changed a lot, right? I started to withdraw. I started to deal with a lot of negative emotions. I just isolated myself, and then I realized that I was experiencing, like you said, the stymic depression because I was high functioning and I didn't seem like I was depressed, but I was. And it took me almost fast forward almost 15 to 20 years later when I was actually diagnosed in rehab that they were saying like so they took a biopsychosocial and my psychiatrist was saying like you're so depressed and sad it doesn't even you seem like you're bouncing off the walls and you're the happiest person in the world, but they was like your serotonin levels is all the way down here, a normal person is up here as far as their state of happiness, you're all the way down here, we need to get you to a normal state. But the thing for me was I'm the life of the party, I'm pop, I'm energetic, I'm always,
Mhm.
so it was amazing that I was experiencing this extreme form of depression and sadness that I was carrying around with my addiction, but it never showed itself that way. It always seemed
Mhm.
like I was happy, but I wasn't. And
Yeah.
that was a lot because it's complex. So, all right. So in your case, going back, so let's go back again. Do you think that losing your friend and the loss of your martial arts school or your school closing had some effect on you, or was that the beginning of your depression? Is there a correlation there?
I honestly think the depression would have hit me either way. I just think they corresponded with each other. It was just like,
Oh,
my friend, I lost my friend, which was obviously a traumatic thing. I got diagnosed with secondary PTSD, years later. But, the karate school thing was just that I lost my support system, just added to, that I lost
right.
that support system. That's something that people have to go through, but it was just kind of like compounded, right? So that depression was tough. It was real tough, right? And this sounds kind of crazy, right? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little off topic, but I could feel the difference between my grief and my depression, right? So like
Oh,
when I remember being at work and I was crying and it felt cleaner because I was
mm,
crying for him. And it sounds crazy, right? If anybody hasn't experienced depression, but it felt cleaner. Like when my depression hit me, it felt like another thing sounds weird, right? But it feels like all the colors drained out of the world.
wow, I like that.
Um, and then, slowly I started kind of getting color back, right? And it was like building myself back up brick by brick, like I said.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it got super dark. I don't really talk about my story a whole lot in the book or anything because I don't want to bore people. I'm just trying to get people out. Um, but and I also don't want people to think that, because our stories aren't exactly the same, that they don't have the hope, right? Because you don't have the exact same story as anyone, right? Nobody has the
No.
exact same story as someone. But I bet you think, or I bet that anybody who's sucked in, the one thing that unifies us is we can get out of it. right? That's the one thing
Yes.
we have in common.
Right.
That's what I'm really trying to push. Yeah.
And it's not a lifetime sentence. It's not a death
No,
sentence.
it's
I
not.
I think a lot of people feel that, and I just it's important for us to talk about. And your story is important, like my story is important because it gives someone hope. You know, there's this real stigma and negative idea of what mental health is still in the world, and we're trying to break that stigma. And it's also the tools that we use to overcome mental health, that's still a issue. People frown upon therapy. They think it's not for you have to be crazy. This concept of crazy or insane. And there's many of us who are walking around with some form of mental health condition or something, some underlining something
Yeah.
that I don't think you could go through a whole lifetime unscathed without dealing with some form of anxiety, some form of depression, some form of sadness, something, right? The brain is definitely a sensitive thing. You said something that really sparked my interest because I'm like a nerd for this stuff. You said that you work on the brain health, and
Yeah.
well, talk to us about that. What tell me about that, and how did you get into looking at the brain, and what exactly do you do there?
All right. So I just did a presentation on this last week. So I'm a brain health trainer through the Functional Aging Institute, right? So
Mm,
like it's part of your continuing education credits. It was just like one of those things I did through my personal training, right? Because you got to
okay.
take these extra classes. So like I was doing that. My passion is helping people. So I was doing, the personal training and the nutrition stuff. And I was like, well, how can I step this up? And I'm actually going to grad school starting in January to become like a psychotherapist. So I was like, I
Nice.
want to do something like I want to understand the brain a little bit more. So it's run by the dudes who do the Pacific Brain Health Center in California.
Okay.
And you probably don't know who that is, but they also train under Daniel Amen, and you may know who that
Yeah,
is.
that's my guy.
Yeah, yeah,
That's my
yeah.
guy.
So they train under him too. So it's a lot of his stuff there. And it's real interesting. Like you're essentially you're building up, they call it cognitive reserve, right, through these different exercises that we have.
Okay.
And so that means that you're building so much gray and white matter, you're making it so dense that when you get older and some of it starts to deteriorate, you're not going to notice it. It doesn't matter. Your brain is so healthy,
Right.
it's not gonna have any effect on you. It's super interesting stuff. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Dr. Amen is the man. I love him. He was
Yeah.
the first doctor to really actually say, how are you going to diagnose someone for a brain condition without looking at the brain, right? You have
Yeah.
to use brain imagery, which was amazing, right?
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by that. So we talk about building the gray matter, building this white matter. We use mindfulness techniques, meditation. We have these things called the longevity effect, the telomere effect, or the lifestyle choices we make
Yeah.
can affect our longevity and
Yeah.
our overall health. It all coincides together. So there's an aspect of your book, you and myself, that I find fascinating is that we cover many topics to get around healing, right? So you're doing personal training, nutrition, right? You're doing all of these things. You're looking at the brain. For me to really have the success, I had to meditate. I had to learn about my brain. I had to learn about my mental health. I had to actually take medication. I had to learn about vitamins and nutrition deficiencies and stuff like that. I had to pray. I had to go to AA. I had to do all of these things kind of to
Yes.
become this
Yes.
well-rounded person in healing. So you're doing the same thing. I call it the all-in approach. You have like
Yes.
this, right? Right?
Thank
Talk
you.
to
Yeah.
us about that.
Yeah, cool. So we're on the same page here. I call it the D-Day approach, which
Okay.
is which is kind of morbid, right? Maybe I'll call it the all-in approach now. Like, yeah, because you're coming at it with everything. Because, like, figure if something makes a 10% difference, and then something else makes a 10% difference, something else makes a 10% difference. Okay, well, now we're going to get somewhere when we start compounding all these things, right?
Right.
And it's kind of like almost like a 1 + 1 = 4 type thing. Like when you start adding them together, it's not just going to be the sum. It's going to be like this compounding thing, right?
Right.
So yeah, like I absolutely love that, and I want people to get out of the mindset of like the silver bullet approach, right? Because
Yeah.
there's nobody who is like, oh, I'm gonna work to get my out of my addiction. Like once I weigh 250 pounds of muscle, I'll be out of my addiction. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't
You gotta
work.
you gotta combine it. You gotta combine, and it works the same thing. It's the same exact thing with depression. You got to combine all these things. I just love what you said, man. I'm glad we're on the same
Yeah,
page.
we're on the same page. And going back a bit, I always like to go all the way back. You was talking about you- it's just it's the book that's come to mind is But the Body Keeps the Score.
Oh
And
yeah,
we
yeah, yeah. Right
right.
on. Yeah,
And you was talking about how grief is something that you have to go through, right? And we know that unprocessed emotions based on this book and this study get stuck in the body, right? So I like to explain to people that there's no easy way out, like the Rocky song. There's no easy way out. There's no shortcut home, right? But the thing about it is, like, you have to, it's very important for us to explain to people the importance of not hiding your emotions, not suffocating them, really talking to someone. Talk therapy is
yes,
really amazing for me. That helped me. Confiding in someone. This also leads to shame. Also, shame. There's this like overlap between shame, guilt, depression, sadness, addiction. All of this stuff is connected, and I'm putting the pieces together somehow. Though over the years of interviewing people and looking at myself as kind of like a case study, I'm like, damn, man, I had to deal with the shame. I had to understand the difference between the shame and the guilt. I had to process my emotions. I had to talk about the death of my father because that was something that was bothering me. So, can you talk to us about that? Like, I call it like for lack of a better term, finish what you start, or following through with the process of dealing with the underlying trauma, the
yeah.
emotions, talking to someone.
Well, first off, we got to drop the shame. There is no shame in this, right? Like, you're not going to shame somebody who weighs 300 pounds and they're trying to lose some weight, right? Like,
Right.
you would never shame them for that, right? And just like when people take medication for anything, right? For depression, let's just say, for taking medication, well, you wouldn't shame somebody for taking medication for diabetes. So,
No.
like, why are you going to shame somebody for it's just a different organ? And I do think, our generation, it's changing. I do think attitudes are changing, but I mean, we're still in that mindset where people are like afraid to go into the self-help section of a bookstore because like they're embarrassed, right? They're like, oh,
Right.
they're afraid people are going to be judging them, like, oh, that's for broken people, right? Just like therapy,
Wow.
oh, broken people. But that's not the case, right? So
Right.
right? You're on the inside, so like and there's more and more people like you out there putting the word out, right? So
Right.
that's good. Um, Pop, I forget your question, man. I'm sorry. I'm
Nah,
just trying to agree with you
no,
here.
no, you did well.
Oh
You
no,
did
no, I
well.
got you. I got you. No, no,
Right.
no. I got. Well, yeah, sorry. Yeah, because you were saying, essentially, and I want to drive this home. Like, you got to put in the work, just like you were saying.
Yes,
Um,
you have to.
that's really what it comes down to, right? Because it's not osmosis. You're not going to sit there. You're not going to read a book and just lay down and it's all going to happen,
No.
right? You got to put in the work every single day. But here's the thing: it's not like it's hard work, but it's not like painful work. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like parts of it will be painful, like if you're in therapy, things like that. But it's going to be so rewarding. It's so worth it. So you got to put in the work there. You got to have that drive every day to put in that work. And that's really seconding what you said. Yeah.
I love it. Can we talk about how yoga? How I'm fascinated by it. I never really started to I practice more of the meditation side of it, and the mental part of it. But I think the physical practice is equally as powerful. Can you talk to us on how that helped you in your journey and any benefits it may have for depression?
Oh yeah, yeah. So yoga is a big deal in my life, right? So, but I got into that because of martial arts. Like, I couldn't fight anymore. I dislocated my shoulders, and
Oh man.
even like fighting is a weird term, right? Because we're not, we're all
Right.
friends there, right? But
Correct.
so yoga was my new martial art. It was my new like somatic thing, right? Somatic
Right.
therapy, I guess you could say,
Okay.
right? And so here's my big thing with yoga. So if you love anybody with depression, I would say to them, hey, would you mind coming with me to yoga class? I'm a little shy. Would you mind coming with me? I think that's the perfect thing to say because if you get
Wow.
them to go to a yoga class, first off, well, you're getting them out of the house. Second, you're making them feel good about it, right? Because they're doing you a favor. But then you're also getting them moving around. They're using their body. they're learning new things, they're having fun, and then they got the whole social aspect. And you don't have a lot of jerks in yoga classes, right? So you're going to be around probably some pretty nice people. So that's like, I just think it's one of the most effective ways to kind of shake people loose and get them when they're in a real deep depression. That's one of the things I wish people had done to me, was say, hey, would you mind coming with me? One of the most effective things, because you're bringing in, you know, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, you're bringing it all in. So, and you're getting the built-in meditation, like you said. It's super powerful.
Right. Have you ever had a chance to read the autobiography of a yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda?
It's literally on my shelf. I haven't read
Uh,
it. I
is
haven't
it?
read it. But to be fair,
Yeah.
to become like a yoga teacher, we had to read 6 books. So
Okay.
I'm finishing that up. I got another week to do that. So yeah.
Yes, yes. That's an excellent book. It talks about that talks about more about the Vedic principles and the higher principles of meditation. And it's a paramount. I was fascinated with him ever since a young man, right? And it took me years to read it. That's a book that you'll read in pieces, but it brought it back to the fore. Yeah, I want to get into a yoga practice. I injured my back about 2 years ago. That was my apprehension,
Yeah.
but I think it can help me because I need
Okay.
to be more mobility is another thing that's important, being mobile and mobile. I'm
Yeah, that
definitely gonna take it up. I'm gonna use you as motivation and probably look into this.
if you're ever here, let me know. You can hop into one of my classes if you're ever in Jersey again. You're not that
Okay,
far. I'm in New Jersey and you're in Brooklyn, for listeners who don't
right,
know that.
right.
But yeah, if you're around, just hop into one of my classes, and it is real good for injuries, man. I think that's another reason I think everybody should be doing it.
I love it. So I want to shift to the next part of our topic, which is extremely important, is nutrition and mental health. Now we know that excessive sugar, excessive fatty foods and stuff plays on our dopamine reward centers. That creates really negative behavior patterns on how we use food. And we also know that there's studies that suggest that inflammation from sugar and junk food can lead to depressive symptoms.
Yeah.
So we know nutrition is extremely foundational for me. I mean, if my diet is off, I look like crap, I feel like crap. It all works together. If you look good, you're gonna be less inclined to feel terrible. You're gonna have one step up. It's like that 10% we was talking about. Can you talk about your journey in nutrition and how that helped you with depression and just help you be optimal in an optimal state of health?
Yeah. So to put things into perspective right now, I'm 5'9" and I'm 170 pounds, which means nothing, right? But I'm a personal trainer. I work out 6 days a week. So that's not a lot of fat, right?
Right.
5'9", 170. Cut back to then. I was 5'9", 123 pounds. So I was almost 50 pounds lighter.
Wow.
So what I was doing was I was just taking, you know, all the surface advice, like the things I would see on the news or like on TV about how you should eat less and then you'll feel better. So that's what I was doing, and without like the knowledge. So it wasn't until I started like dialing in my diet that I started to like and working out at the same time, right? Started building that muscle and feeling like I could
Right.
like I didn't feel sick anymore. I didn't feel
Mm.
like, you know, and that made a big difference on my mood, of course, you know, not feeling sick anymore. But I also had that sense of pride, like, oh, I can build muscle, like, or that sense of hope, I should say. Like, if I can gain 10, then 20, then 30 pounds of muscle, you know, through dialing in my diet, that's going to help. You know, that's like, it's like I have some kind of control here in my life. Like, this is pretty good. On top of that, I should note this, you know, most people don't know this. You actually create 90 to 95% of your serotonin in your gut, not in your brain.
Mm.
So getting that inflammation down is important. Also, getting the right foods in you that like um, that only work for you. And let me put it this way: I think everybody should get um, an allergy test or an intolerance test.
Right.
Okay. And they'll test you for a bunch of different foods, but everybody's a little different. That sounds lazy, but it's true. So, like, for me, I know if I have a glass of milk, it's not going to end well, right? So, like,
Okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
But I know other people who like just feel a little bit off, and they're like, I'm not sure. But that's creating all that inflammation in their gut. And then,
Right.
like you said, there's direct links between the inflammation. And if you can get that, if you're lucky enough to be able to get one of those allergy tests, that's a big deal, because then you
Right.
can just be like, okay, if I cut all these things out and I can start getting my gut in the right order, you know, it's like all these things working together, right? You get
Right.
that. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, I don't want to keep you all night, but I could talk to you about it all night.
No, I'm extremely fascinated also. And for me, I so I went on this journey when I first found my hold on, I'm sorry. Let me just
Yeah,
turn this down. When I first found my recovery, I went so your brain, your dopamine receptors are starting to rebuild after you I dealt with my drug of choice is alcohol.
yeah,
So with alcoholism, you really compromise your dopamine receptors. Every time you have a drink, your brain, alcohol floods your brain with dopamines, totally affects your dopamine receptors through time. Your dopamine receptors get weaker and weaker. And when you get sober, your brain starts to attempt to repair that process. So that's how you feel kind of crappy. They had those different post-acute withdrawal. For me, well, for most addicts and people that's dealing with that, they tend to want to load up on sugar and stuff that gives them fast fuel for their brain. So I was doing everything. I was good in my mind, as long as I was sober, I could eat whatever I want. I'm doing good. But then I developed pre-diabetes and then
oh,
my health started to decline. And that's when I really had to get serious about my nutrition process, which that led me to first the keto diet, and then from the keto diet that led me to the plant-based diet, and
yeah,
now I'm somewhere between healthy keto, plant-based, and stuff like that. I also practice intermittent fasting, which helps me greatly
yeah.
because of autophagy, cell cleaning, just having that window to clean your body out. Dr. Longo is the premier doctor on fasting and all good things intermittent fasting related, and it makes a big difference. I really have to say that it makes a gigantic difference in my health, my mood, how I feel about myself. And you're right. Now I'm able through intermittent fasting and understanding the what foods that I can tolerate. I'm able to really build healthy muscle, and it feels good, man. It does something with your self-esteem. They always say muscle is expensive, so once you have it, it does send positive signals to the rest of your body and your cells that that you have vitality. So I tell people you need you want to maintain some healthy muscle weight. And instead of focusing so much on your weight, focus more on how you feel, right? Don't look at the waistline, just focus on how you feel in time and give it time. I don't believe in fad diets. I don't believe in crash diet. I believe in lifestyle modifications. Um, you know, so
I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, we're speaking the same language. I mean, you said it perfectly.
yeah,
Like,
thank you, thank you,
yeah.
thank you. So, in your book, is there any other topics that you discuss that's outside of that we may not have time? Like, what's the one driving force that you want to bring home in your book? I think for someone who has no idea if they have depression, but they feel like crap, someone who may just come across it, what would they get out of it that could really help them go from not really understanding anything to pretty much being able to get the help that they need?
It's well, first off, you got to build a team.
Nice.
You can't do it alone. Um, so and it's a lot of guys who are like, they want to feel like they're in total control, and you really are. But you got to just think of yourself as like the manager of a team. Like you're the CEO, however you want to put it, right?
Right.
So like I couldn't have done it without my therapist, and I couldn't have done it without even my primary care doctor who got me on medication. And that was the very last thing I did, which, and I could have been okay without it, but I'm better now, like,
Right.
because of it, right?
Right. Right.
And she was really, really good about like explaining to me that if I don't like the medication, I can always just come off. It's
Right.
not like something permanent. And she was the one who told me, and I feel like this is important to let people know, like when I went on the medication, there were side effects, but I know a lot of people who quit after a week. But those side effects, if you give it a few weeks, they all go away. So like
Mm,
that's another important thing, right?
right.
I'm kind of going on and on here, but
No, no, it's important. Zach, believe it or not, it's those little nuances that could change someone's life.
yeah, it's things that I wish I had known, because like I said, it was a solo journey. I'm not going to get into my story like I said, but it was a solo journey, and it was just things I wish I had known. Now, like I wrote the book for the 20-year-old me, basically. I'm trying to
I
get the
love
word
that.
out.
I love
Yeah.
that. I did sober is dope for the 20-year-old me too. Like if I came across this podcast when I was younger, I think it would have made a real difference in how my life played out because
Exactly.
it's not that many people who were speaking to me at that time. And it's
Yeah.
important to have compassion on the next generation because they're figuring it out just like us. They're deep. They have access to the internet and all of these things. And a lot of people are self-medicating. They're confused. And depression is tough, man. I still do. Look, I think we all have like the way the way the world is unfolding. It's hard to believe that people don't go through these like we was talking about intermittent fasting, but I feel like there's intermittent bouts of depression that people could experience just the news. My biggest thing is don't watch the news. I tell people there's no reason you could have a real working understanding of what's happening with current events through other means. The news is a business that's built on selling fear to sell advertisement space in newspapers and stuff like that.
Pop, I don't think I had to come on this show. It's like I'm talking to myself here.
It's
Like,
deep. I went through the same journey as you, and I think we asked the same questions, but the news forgot. I mean, I put the news on within the first 5 minutes, more negative things that I may have heard in the whole month. Just in the 5 minute, like this person, this thing had, and I'm like, well, why don't they highlight? Why is it not balanced? Why don't they have a positive news channel? Because it doesn't sell. People love fear. People they want to. That's what sells, right? Doesn't mean that's the reality. They take a snapshot of everything that happened in a nation and feed it to you within a 30-minute window.
yeah. And you know what else they love? They love being angry, and that we got to cut that out.
Right.
We got to cut that
Separation,
out. Yeah.
red versus blue, Republican
Yeah.
versus Democrat. All of that stuff is just, it takes us away from our primary calling, which is to love, to live, to nurture, and to advance our species to the next level in a harmonious way with the right vibrations and the right positive intentions because we cannot survive another 10,000 years if we're going to be doing it through hate, division, anger, fear, and all of these negative constructs. It just doesn't work. And forgiveness is one of the biggest
Oh,
ideas, right?
yeah.
I
You're
think,
taking these words out of my mouth, man.
and I think we can wrap. I want to sit here for a minute. I think forgiveness is one of the things that helped me get out of the mental health slump or the mental illness slump because I had to learn to forgive myself and to start to forgive others. Can you talk about that for us?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, literally, I was talking about that on another podcast. Yeah, and you hit it on the head. Of course, you want to forgive yourself, and we do talk about that more often. But people are going to say stupid things to you, and sometimes it's because they just don't understand because they can't understand. They're not addicted or they don't have depression. Like they don't get it. They're going to say stupid things to you, or it's because it's something they're going through, right? So you got to practice that forgiveness for them too, because that's not your weight to carry around.
Right.
Pop, you're cracking me up, dude. This is like, this is like,
Hey, I love it. I love it. When something is seated within the truth, there's a lot of commonalities, right? And I think between us, I think we're very serious about what we had to go through. And for me, it's scary because I remember how dark it could get. And I think that darkness is why I think we're doing what we're doing. We don't want someone else to sit there and feel that level of despair without knowing that there's a way out or at least there's a road to travel, right? So therapy, I want to talk about therapy. Have you ever dealt with therapy? Have you ever went to see an actual therapist, psychiatrist, or psychologist?
yeah. So what I did was I went to one. I was like 18 or 19, and I went once. It didn't work, and I was like, okay, I guess it's not for me. Because but the thing was, I tried one lady, right? And this is like a relationship you're building here. People don't think about it that way. It wasn't until my fourth therapist that it finally started like working for me.
Oh.
So you got to think about it that way. Because I remember the third lady I went to, she was like real like by the book, like very methodical and very formal. And I'm a very informal guy.
Right.
It just, and it just wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for me. And it wasn't until finally, it was actually a college professor I had. he said he had a private practice, and I was like, all right, I'll go to him. I already kind of know him, and that worked out. So, you know, if you're lucky enough to do it, if you're lucky enough to have the means to do it, you know, it's worth going through a few of them. And, you know, and I should note, you know, there are resources out there for people who can't afford it too. There are resources. It just takes a little bit of digging.
Right. And they have all of these new online apps and these different places you could go where it's like $25 a session and stuff. They make it affordable. Well, luckily in New York, we have, I don't know, New York has a really good healthcare, and it's really easy to get to see someone if you need to. For me, what I did was I went to a therapist first, because a therapist can, I did a whole episode on this, where a therapist can pretty much recommend you to see a psychiatrist, which could then turn around and diagnose you or prescribe you medication, right? So my therapist was cool. She was really cool, and it was fun because I was a lot young. What they were talking about 8 years ago, so I was just early in my 30s, and I was just like kind of like, oh man, you know, this lady, she's beautiful. At the same time, she's young, she's hip, but she's smart, she's sharp. She understood me, and it was cool. I was intense, and she was able to say, okay, you know, Joe, this is what I suggest for you. I'm gonna recommend you to the psychiatrist. And it was this beautiful Japanese lady, and then she was like, you're real cool, I like you, I like it. It's the way she explained it. And I think they had to take a biopsychosocial, and I tell people the importance of the biopsychosocial. It really helps, kind of like, it gives the psychiatrists and the caseworkers a really good snapshot, an overall snapshot of who you are, your childhood, your personality type, your behavior. It creates this unique profile. And when my psychiatrist first met me, she was like, you know, everything was God, this, universe, this, aliens, and fourth dimension and vibrations, and it was just crazy. I was all over the place. And when she took my biopsychosocial, she came to me and said, Joe, I got good news. She was like, this is amazing. Your biopsychosocial says you're not crazy, and that all of these things that you believe in is actually part of who you are. And it's exciting because it all makes sense now. I can't separate. Say she called me Joe. I can't separate Joe from all of this spiritual stuff. It's like, this is who you are. I think you should embrace it. And for the first time, I didn't feel crazy, because I was always extreme like that. I was always like big on miracles and taking leaps of, like, gigantic leaps of faith and all of this stuff, but it was part of who I really was. And then they was like, all you just need is some Wellbutrin to help you with your serotonin levels, because that would make you feel better. And I did that in conjunction with the meditation, the exercising, and everything. And look, we here today 8 years later.
That's great.
And it's amazing, right? And this is what we're talking about, breaking the stigma of mental illness, because it was nothing wrong with me. It was just that I had a few bumps and scrapes, and I try to self-medicate and deal with it myself. And like you said, the only difference between myself and you was that you don't have an allergy. I did. Mm-hmm. So, right? So I took that one drink as a form of escape and couldn't get off of it. And it just took time to heal. So I'm so excited to speak to you today, Zach, because you're going to give a lot of people hope. And although you don't want to go deep into your story, what we will get from this episode is that you did the work to heal.
Oh, that's what it takes. Takes the work.
Right. And I want to ask you the most direct question I could ever ask you. How are you doing today? Are you struggling? Is there still times where you still go through mild depression? I know it's a lifetime thing. How are you doing? I care about you as a friend. I just want to check in with you.
I'm doing well. You know, like I hesitate to say that I conquered it. That's how it feels to me. But I hesitate to say it because I put in the work. Like, I still do all these steps every day. I live it, you know, like, so if I stopped everything, maybe I would slide back, but I'm not going back there.
Right.
I'm keeping doing the work, right? I'm keeping growing. Yeah.
I love it. So what's next for you? You have your book. You're going for your master's degree. You're a martial art guy. You're doing yoga. You're doing everything. You're into nutrition. Yeah. What's next for you, Zach? What's on the table?
Dude, I can't take on anymore.
Maybe a podcast down the line. You never know.
I don't know. I don't
You never
know.
know.
You're already doing a good job. I'll leave it.
Thank you, thank you. All
Yeah.
right. So, but yeah, I mean, can you tell us? So before we go and before we wrap, I just want to really thank you. It's exciting. I can't talk to you all day, and I would like you to come on more as like our
Oh,
in-house expert
I
in
will,
different subjects.
yeah,
All right.
I'm honored, man. I would love to for
Yeah,
sure.
because I like the way you think. I like your flexibility, and you're really well rounded. And I think the approach, what you said, the DD approach, the Doomsday approach,
D-Day.
the
Yeah.
D-Day approach. I love it, and the all-in approach. We got, I think they're important for the future of healing,
Yeah.
no matter what industry we're in. We're healing. We're healing on a cellular level, mental level, spiritual level, psychological level. It's
Yeah.
all levels of healing.
You're
So I
right.
want to thank you for joining us today. And can you tell everyone again where they can find your book, any closing remarks that you may have, and how anyone can get in touch with you via social media? The
Yeah,
floor
yeah.
is yours.
The book is just called The Official Depression Relief Playbook, and you can get it on Amazon. Real good as a gift. A lot of people with depression don't seek out the help, so this would be a nice gift to give somebody. Um, but aside from that, if you want to hit me up, you can just email me. It's just, I'll spell it for you. It's ZackSRutledge@gmail.com, and it's ZackSRutledge@gmail.com. And really, the last thing is, I really don't want anyone to give up hope. Um, people are always saying, "Oh, it could be worse. It could be worse." That's a lot of times people would say that to me. But
Right.
I need you guys to remember, it could be better. You can make it better. That's the message I want to get across. It can be for everyone.
I love it. I love it. And that brings me to post traumatic growth. And I like to leave there. We can grow out of a traumatic experience. Michael Tedeschi was the founder of the concept of PTG, which is post traumatic growth. And we can grow through post traumatic stress disorder. And out of it all, come out on a positive side with a positive outlook, stronger and more refined. So, Zack, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining Sober is Dope today. We're going to take you up on yoga. We're going to take you up on making sure we optimize our nutrition. We're going to take you up on a DD approach, and we're going to pick up your book. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Sober is Dope podcast. I'm your host, POP Buchanan, and that's a wrap for our episode with the great Zack Rutledge on the Sober is Dope podcast. I love you all, and I'll catch you all on the other side. Hang tight, Zack. All right.